Here's something that will help you to stop talking yourself out of trying in life. It's something that has helped me to just do, to be cringe, to go for it, to try something new, to shoot my shot, to be real, to be honest, to take my inner life thoughts and turn them into outer life actions that have real life-changing rewards attached to them. It's something that, building on an episode I did a couple of weeks ago about why we need to introduce some healthy chaos into our lives, to be whole, not to be perfect, to embrace being a hot mess at times. It's something that has helped me to do just that, to not allow myself to talk myself out of trying because in my head it sounds unlikely to succeed, or I'm not ready, or what will other people think? And it's basically the idea that we never know until we try. And of course, that's self-help 101, right? The old, I'd rather have a whoops than a what if. I'd rather hear no than wonder what could have happened, right? But let's break this down a bit more mindfully and practically, and I hope you find what I've found. And that's the power of taking an idea and acting on it instead of just relying on the thought of the idea, because those two things are not the same, doing the idea and the thought of the idea. And I hope you find the motivation to believe in yourself more than the description you have of the idea in your head. So this will make sense in a second. And I'll use the example of Rick Rubin, something he said in an interview with Zane Lowe on BBC Radio 9 years ago or something. And if you don't know who Rick Rubin is, for a long time, he was this mysterious guy, right? But in recent years, he's become really popular in creative culture and music culture because he wrote a book and he's done some really big interviews. But Rick Rubin is arguably one of the most important, influential people in music, a big behind-the-scenes guy, not a performer, not an artist, but a huge influence. He's not even a producer. And he's not musically talented as far as singing or playing an instrument. He doesn't really even create music himself, but he advises musicians. And he's known for having great taste. He's known for having this ability to listen and offer guidance to some of the world's most famous musicians. He's worked with everyone, literally everyone, from Adele to Ed Sheeran and Beyonce and Eminem and Johnny Cash and Jay-Z and bands like Slipknot and Metallica, all genres. And he's this epic guy, big, long, white beard, musically so insanely successful. But it's interesting to learn about him because he admits that he doesn't have these like tangible musical talents. He has taste, and he knows how to work with artists in a really mindful and creative way to get the best out of them. And Rick Rubin went on to co-found Def Jam Records, which I'm sure you know about. So he's really this legend, right? He's this like Zen-like guy who just knows how to get the best out of artists, and he's done it time and time again. And I was watching this interview he did with Zane Lowe the other day, and you can watch it on YouTube. But Zane asked him a question about what he's learned, because Rick Rubin has worked with so many different artists across a wide variety of genres, and his answer really hit me. And it made me realize the power of chaos, the power of trying, the power of never talking yourself out of an idea, no matter how crazy or silly or simple or awkward the idea sounds. Never talk yourself out of the idea just based on the description of the idea. So basically he said the following. He said, never try to judge an idea based on the description. Always musically try the idea. He said that an artist will say to them, hey, I have this idea. We could write the bridge like this. And they'll give me a description of the idea, and it sounds terrible. The description sounds terrible. But I'll always say, great, can't wait to hear it. And then they do it, and it sounds incredible. So we never rely only on the description. It's always, show it to me, let's hear it. So that is what Rick Rubin said. And that was his answer. Really great. And I think you could probably tell where I'm going with this. In music, in creative fields, in art and acting, we can't talk ourselves out of trying based on the idea in our heads or the description on paper. We can't talk ourselves out of getting in front of the mic or the piano or the camera and just giving it a shot. We can't do that because humans have this uncanny ability, both good and bad, to assign predisposed conclusions about vulnerable acts before they even happen. On one hand, the rewarding side, we have the ability to say, I love this person, or I enjoy this thing so very much. This speaks to me. I know this is right for me. This is great. And it's great that we can tap into something inside of us that is so emotionally vulnerable. That is great. So that was his answer. And I think you could probably tell where I'm going with this. In music, certainly in creative fields and in art, we can't talk ourselves out of trying based on the idea in our heads or the description on paper. We can't talk ourselves out of actually getting in front of the mic or the piano or the camera and just giving it a shot. We can't do that because we have this uncanny ability, both good and bad, to have predisposed conclusions about what we're going to do before we even do it. Right? So on one hand, on the rewarding side, we have this ability to say, I love this thing, I love this idea, this speaks to me. I know this is right, I know this is great. And it's great that we can tap into something inside of us that is emotional and that is rewarding. That's great. Without that intention, we'd only be looking to other people for what's right for us. But on the other hand, because we do this, because we assign emotional conclusions to things before we've even tried or done them, we also do the opposite. We talk ourselves out of trying because we've assigned an emotion to it. Sometimes it could be a negative one or an insecure one. Oh, I can't do that. That'll be awkward. That'll be likely to fail. I'm not that person. Who am I to try? That won't work, and so on and so forth. We project based on the emotion, and we talk ourselves out of trying because the description of the idea in our head is riddled with that emotion. And of course, life needs checks and balances, right? Those kinds of conversations in our head are good. They prevent us from doing stupid, irresponsible things. Good. But there's something to be said regarding life's most vulnerable efforts. There's something to be said about not just relying on the idea, the thought of the idea, the description of the idea. We have to try. We need to try for the very reason that something in theory is very rarely what it becomes in reality, be that music or art or acting or telling someone how you feel or starting a business or asking for a raise or just being honest in life. Not to oversimplify life, but more often than not, I've found that ideas, especially the ideas that require our realest, most passionate, most vulnerable selves, they rarely carry with them the true reward of their action. We never know the gift of the idea until we see it in action. An idea is just an idea. We have to do it. We never know the gift it has for us until we see it in action. Because so many amazing things, of course, happen that will never happen if we only live in the land of our heads. We could try that thing and it could turn out amazing. The opposite of the cringe, awkward failure thoughts we've assigned to it initially, just based on the description. Or it could turn out middle of the road, but the act of trying ignites a new thought, and then you pivot, you add some new sauce, and suddenly you're on the right track. But you'll never know either of those options if you only rely on the thought of the idea, the description of the idea. Personally, I can give you countless examples in my life, professionally, creatively, personally, even in this podcast, even in this video. When I first started doing this in 2018, the idea was cringy. Who am I to start a self-help podcast? That's cringe, that's awkward, that's lame. Why would anyone listen to me? And sure, some of that might even be true, but that was the description of the idea in my head. But when I forced myself to sit down and start, the first version was kind of lame. It was kind of similar to that, just me spouting off some rhetoric that I had heard before. But then I got excited to try the same idea, but with new sauce. No lecturing, no sound bites, nothing repetitive, just me trying to make sense of my life logically. That was how I came to approach mindfulness. All I statements. And the jury's still out on this, I suppose, but I found my stride through trying. I moved from description to action and then pivoted and wound up here. And now I do this full time. But I never would have gotten here if I let that description exist as the final conclusion, because it wasn't fair, it wasn't true, it existed only in theory. Quitting my job too. That was one I wrestled with for a long time. The idea sounded horrible to me. Let go of my well-paying job in sales, share my feelings for a living, bound to fail. Only some people are meant for entrepreneurship or being a writer. What would I even do? How would I even make money? The reality of that decision dealt with the same issues, of course, but the reality was very different from the roadblocks I pictured in my head, and so on and so forth. In life, we only know for sure what we're willing to touch and experience. Everything else is fairy dust. Truly, everything else is theory. And sometimes our theories suck, truly, because we're predisposed to projecting ourselves, and we're even more predisposed to unfair self-judgment. So just wanted to do this quickly to encourage you and me to never back down from something based on the idea, the description of the idea. See if you can take one or two steps with that idea, because that forces you to get it out of your head and into reality. But we have to make a pact with ourselves to not quit based on the description of the idea alone. And of course, we're balancing this with a sense of awareness and maturity. I'm not talking about doing unhinged things like running red lights or just being crazy. I'm talking about the motivation in life that comes from a place of genuine inspiration, a love of art, music, creation, a love for another person that has been clearly and deeply developed inside of you. And that when it strikes and you have that motivation and inspiration, it's real and you don't let it go away. You're not tempted to cast it aside because the description sounds unlikely or lame or whatever. Compose music, put it on the internet. Start a side hustle, write a book, tell that person how you really feel, have a conversation you've been dreading with your parents, put yourself out there, whatever it is. We can't just rely on that description. We can't just rely on words. Rick Rubin, of course, says musically always try the idea, but in life, always try the idea in life, not just in your head, not just in theory, in life with action of some kind. Because descriptions tend to talk ourselves out of trying. We usually lean towards what's the worst that can happen, and we're really good at pointing out worst case scenarios. So perhaps the answer lies in flipping that. Force yourself to say, what's the best that could happen? Find words that could describe the best case to motivate you to just try. We're practical creatures. We need a catalyst to try. What's the best case scenario of creating that music or asking that person out or asking for a raise or having that difficult conversation? Find the words to try, keep those in your mind, and then find a way to take a step forward, big or small, to prove to yourself that ideas in theory are just theory, and keeping them are sure to keep you from experiencing the potential reward of reality.